when you're talking about systemic, she's very conveniently only points to hierarchical government right at the top and says, well, because that's male right at the top, then it can be systemic, but it can't be systemic unless there's no at the top echelons of government. And it's like, okay, but what about like schools, which are completely inundated with women? Most of the teachers are women. Most of the institutions are women. Most of the people participating are women. Like overwhelmingly, that's a female institution. It's like, so can't teachers at the very least show sexism towards men?
Systemically, if an entire school decided we are not going to hire male teachers, yeah, I'd say that's
no. How about like just systemically, most of the teachers decide that they're going to institute standards which benefit little girls over little boys?
Do they do that currently?
Yeah.
What standards would you say?
Just even things like hold still for long periods of time, be very quiet in class, fold your hand, clasp your hands. When we look at studies for how boys learn versus how girls learn, boys are much more rambunctious. They need breaks for much longer periods of time. Rough and tumble play needs to be encouraged, things like that. So schools definitely favor young girls over boys.
Well, I would say part of the reason why you have to sit still and be quiet in class is to maintain class order so that you can learn. And I would also say, as a young girl who's very rambunctious, that does negatively benefit some female students as well.
Well, that's really silly then, because the negative outcome would be on co-ed schools, which is what feminists push for. Whereas we used to have sex-segregated schools where you could teach boys, based on how boys benefit from being taught and girls. Now it's all co-ed.
But I'm saying that if I'm a girl who benefits from how boys are being taught, then why would separating me to a school that is exclusively for girls?
You would get separated to a class with other girls who were like you. But if the entire group,
so you're a segregationist?
What do you mean? Is saying that co-ed schools have worse outcomes than girls or boys only school a segregationist?
So hang on,
answer my question first.
You plan on segregating boys and girls and separating them so they're not in the same schools?
Yeah.
And you want that universally everywhere?
Yeah.
But what do parents want their kids to be in classrooms?
Why would they want that?
So that they can learn how to socialize with the opposite sex, maybe?
They can learn how to socialize with the opposite sex, like after-school events, various things. Like if you got sisters, you would go to them the same way that we always did before we had co-ed schools.
But not all boys learn the same way, and not all girls learn the same way.
But inside of those schools, it would be up to those schools to segregate those students who learned in different ways to put them in special education classrooms.
Okay, so why not just do that in co-ed classrooms in which you have students who all learn the same regardless of gender
because of universalization of the rules favoring one sex over the other, which they do.
Okay, but if you had a co-ed classroom in which all students who learned a specific way, regardless of their gender, were in that room, why not separate them on the basis of learning style instead of just the basis of sex?
Yeah, so if you're asking me, like, why wouldn't we take X amount of these kids and separate them over here and separate them over there? It would be just a resource issue. So we're already looking at 5% GDP. If you were to have all girls schools and all boys schools, right? And you separated them on the basis of all girl, all boy, you would be able to limit resources and allocate them much better to those genders.
Okay, but in public schools...
That's public schools.
I understand that. So in public schools, there's a certain amount of schools per district.
Yeah.
If you were going to separate all of those schools, then there would be either double the schools for...
You could use the same amount. You could use the
district.
same amount of resources to double the school. So if it's the case that right now you had a school which was co-ed, right? You could split that school in half and still make one side boys only, one side girls only if necessary. That happened many, many, many times.
Why not just do it based on learning style?
Because again,
it's the same amount.
You have X amount of resources which are allocated to a group. If you begin to try to relocate every individualistic student into whatever core group you think they might learn best with ultimately, rather than gender segregate, you know that the core, at least most of them share, and then pick those the problematic kids out of that pool. You're going to save a shitload of resources.
We tried that with black people, and it did not go very well.
We're not talking about segregating based on race.
But I mean, if you're segregating based on sex, what if one group is then funded less?
And I want you to think about...
So what if, let's say, what if we did do that, and then there was a case in which teachers who were majority female were systemically discriminating against young boys.
Yeah, then you should get rid of those teachers.
And they defunded the schools that were boy only.
How would they defund them?
Or they choose not to teach those classes, or they choose to teach those classes in a way that is not actually helpful to young boys.
Yeah, you could get teachers in that would do definitely do all male classrooms. They have them right now. And not only that, we always had this, by the way.
But see, this is, I think, the issue.
Hang on. Let's get into it. So for instance, let me give you another few core ideas here. If it is the case that you had sex-segregated schools, do you think sex and sexual intercourse and teenage pregnancy and STDs in schools would go up or down?
It depends on how we're teaching sex education in this
No, just like
classes.
trivially, if there's no women around, they're not going to get pregnant, right?
I don't know. If people want to have sex, they can find the ability to sex.
Oh, I see. So
you know
you
what
think-
this is giving?
so
It's
you-
giving like the number one birth control. Is
So let me
abstinence.
just make sure
Girl.
I got this right. If girls and boys go to different schools, you don't actually think that they would be having underage sex more or less. Do I have that right?
I don't think that we can necessarily say if it would be more or less.
So
I mean, are they less horny?
So like,
how
could
would we
we?
determine
So
whether or
no,
not
they're
children
just
are
as
less
horny, but they
Okay,
just
so
don't have
then
access. They don't have access
Why don't they have access?
because they're in different schools.
But do they not have a phone?
Well, how is they? Even if you have a phone, how do you have the same access you do if Susie's sitting 3 fucking desks down? That's insane.
This is like this is giving boomer. a little
Are you
bit.
ever
I'm sorry.
going to respond? Respond to the argument.
You still have access to them through social media. Oh my God! Hey, you want to meet up? There you
And
go.
is it
Boom,
as
they're there.
easy to meet up with them if you're not in the same school? No.
I thought you just wanted to split schools in half.
Some. You
Okay,
could do
they're
it
still gonna
for
be there.
some.
Okay,
for,
but then
many,
for the other
many
ones-
open campus schools, especially, right? Especially high schools are so large, you could split them in half. And it would be like how a lot of high schools are now, where you have one here and one just down the road.
Okay, and then they'd walk just down the road, and oh my God, look,
You
here's all the bitches.
you
Like-
still don't have the access for talking to them, for arranging it. It's not to say that that wouldn't still happen, but it would necessarily reduce that, wouldn't it? Just necessarily, it would be trivially true that if they did not have as much access to each other, the chances that they're having sex is at least trivially going to go down, right?
Sure, but why not just increase the level of sex education in this?
Yeah, because we've done nothing but promote sex education in school, and it
I don't
has
know,
not
man.
done anything to reduce the idea of STDs in kids at all.
I think that very much depends on the state and the district. I think that
No,
very
I
much is
very
dependent on the
much
school.
don't think
we do
so.
not have a universal
And by
sex
the way,
education
let me just
curriculum in
ask you,
this
like,
country.
this
we
is
literally
so,
don't have that.
This is such a thing that's common sense and drives me crazy with the left because they're so disingenuous about this. Do you really think, as you tell me, kids are smart and they have smartphones and they're gonna fuck if they want to fuck,
They are.
but they're so fucking stupid they don't understand what sex is?
What?
Are kids so fucking smart that they're going to intelligently bypass your sexually segregated schools in order to find each other to have sex, but they're so fucking stupid they don't know what sex is?
No one is claiming kids don't know what sex is. We're claiming that they don't know how to have sex safely.
Oh, so they're so smart they can do that, but they can't figure out how to put a fucking condom on.
Apparently.
Apparently.
I mean, we see it all over the country. Children who do not have access to sex education have a tendency
So these little
to have
fucking
more
MacGyvers
unprotected
are going to
sex.
figure out how to grab their smartphones and MacGyver out how to fucking navigate to find each
Dude,
other to fuck,
you've
but they're
never
not going to
been-
be able to figure out how to slap a condom
Andrew,
on.
you've never been a child with a phone. I have, and I can tell you, it's not that hard to find
What do you
people to
mean?
fuck if you really want
Is it
to.
really hard to Google how to put a condom on?
Yes, but a lot of kids just genuinely do not know or do not care. Or they're allergic to latex, or it hurts.
They're
or they
so
don't like
fucking
it.
smart. And by the way, the idea too that religious parents don't instruct their children on what safe sex is
I didn't say
is
religious
insane.
parents. I never said that.
And by the way, the other problem that you have here is again, you're attributing that these kids have MacGyver-like stealth fucking, prowess where they can meet up with each other, plan all this, coordinate it when they're in sex segregated schools, but can't figure out how to put on condoms or take birth control. That's fucking insane.
They should, but it's not even about putting them on. It's about having access. I didn't know how to have access.
They would
to birth
still
control
have they
until
still
I
have the
learned it
same
in
access.
school.
They're just in sex segregated
But
schools.
they just don't know. But that's what I'm saying. You don't have to do all that. If the goal is to eliminate unprotected and
Increasing
unsafe
sexual
sex,
education in schools is not preventing these issues at all.
yes.
Especially not when it comes to learning and how the rules favor little girls over little boys. It's not helping with any of that. How is sex ed helping with that?
Sex ed so that kids know where to go. Like I learned what Planned Parenthood
How
was
is
through
that
sex
helping
ed.
with the bias towards little girls over little boys in school? How?
Well, not sex education.
Yeah.
Are you talking about safe sex or the bias?
Yeah,
towards
what I'm
children?
telling you is that you have additional benefits with sex segregated schools on top of the primary benefit of not having favoritism over one sex over the other.
Okay, but there are a lot of ways. I feel like one thing that I'm really not loving about your argument is how different you claim girls and boys and men and women are.
They
It
are
feels
very different.
They're not that different. We are 99.9% similar.
And how similar are you to a chimpanzee?
The same.
So are you very different from a chimpanzee?
Yeah, but we have multiple chromosomes different than chimpanzees. We
Wait,
have
I'm
one
sorry.
chromosome
You
off.
just said we're 98, I'm sorry, how much? 98%?
No, 99.9% similar. to chimpanzees.
99.9%
Actually, can you Google that?
similar.
How genetically similar are we to chimpanzees?
Yeah, pull it
now
up.
I kind of want to know.
How genetically similar are human beings to
Are
chimpanzees?
we the same species? Yes or no?
Pull it
Andrew?
up. Of
Are
course
we the
not.
same
Of
species?
course not.
No,
Oh,
I'm not talking
women
about
and women,
us
yes.
Yes.
Humans and chimps share a surprising 98.8% of their
so
DNA.
we're less similar to chimpanzees.
98.8%. And we're very fucking different, aren't we?
Okay, 99.9% is the difference between one chromosome.
Yeah, but
A
do you
singular
understand
chromosome.
that if you're 98 or like almost, by the way, that's almost 99% similar to like one of your ancestral cousins, and you have that much of a stark difference, that a 0.1 percentile can mean a huge difference, and it does. And here's the things that it means a difference in. One sex can reproduce, the other sex cannot. One has physical characteristics that the other one does not. One has strength advantages, the other one does not. One has emotional problems due to hormone regulation built into the body for reproduction that the other does not. The list goes on and on and on of the distinct differences between males and females, and they're huge.
I actually wrote down all of the distinct differences between men and women. So in terms of the physiological, yes, men have denser and stronger bones. They're 34% denser. The difference in average, we have difference in skull shapes and jaw shapes. Men have higher muscle mass percentage than women, which attributes to the strength. Women have higher body fat percentage. Men on average are 7% taller. And then mentally, it's mostly hormonal differences. As we
You
both
also,
agree.
you missed reproduction.
Oh, sure, yes.